Hello, Bill.
Good morning, Matt.
Welcome to the DMZ, everybody.
Actually, this is the proper Independence Day, July 2nd, when John Adams thought America's birthday should be.
It would be greeted with pomp and circumstance. Little children would sing hymns or something, as I recall he said. Right. I forget.
So happy birthday to America. There aren't any tanks rolling down my street in Northampton. I don't know if they're rolling where you are.
Well, they will be soon. I'm going to be in D.C. for the 4th, and it's going to be interesting to see. I usually go to D.C. for the fireworks, and there's traffic, but this year Trump has decided to politicize it and to militarize it. And I'm going to see what effect that may or may not have on my life, because that's really what this is about, Bill.
Well, you know, if
the effect it has on the traffic for me.
If you don't want to suffer that, you can always come to Chesterfield, Massachusetts, which has the greatest 4th of July parade in the country. You can't get more quintessential small-town America than the Chesterfield 4th of July parade. And I don't know if you know this, Matt, but a lot of cities, a lot of towns do fireworks on different days than the 4th to save money on the fireworks costs. I've actually already had the Northampton Family 4th experience over at Look Park here in Northampton. That was 2 weekends ago, and it was a spectacular fireworks. You really get, no pun intended, your bang for the buck when you go off 4th. For your local fireworks, so
that's nothing, Bill. I've been spending a lot of time over in West Bygod, Virginia, where my wife is from, and there you just go to Walmart and buy fireworks, and people just set them off sometimes during the daytime.
That's not my favorite 4th of July fireworks experience, I have to say.
Sometimes as you're sleeping in the middle of the night, so. You know, don't tell me about small-town America.
Anyway, it is a politically active week. Even though it's early, even though it's Tuesday, there's still already a lot to talk about. And while I do want to get into the fallout from the Democratic debates last week, Donald Trump embracing Kim Jong-un, crossing the border in North Korea without having a whit of concession from North Korea. In fact, even reports that he is going to give a big concession to North Korea and acknowledge that they can keep their nuclear weapons. How is conservative Washington and conservative America treating this? I mean, this seems like, of all the things Trump has done that is in violation of conservative principles, I feel like this is one of the biggest.
Yeah, no, I saw a mashup of Fox News juxtaposing things they said about Obama, like wanting to negotiate without preconditions and coddling dictators, and then juxtaposed with how Trump is brilliant, outside the box thinking, and willing to talk to anybody. And
well, I don't know if you saw the Daily Show mashup of North Korea media and American Fox News. That was particularly disturbing.
My old friend Lou Dobbs, I think, had an appearance in that one. No, it's obviously hypocritical, and I don't know what to say. I mean, to me, the same standard.
Are there conservatives who are recognizing that?
Yeah, look, I think the breakdown breaks down very neatly along the lines of, are you a Trump partisan sycophant, or are you an intellectually honest and consistent conservative? And there are plenty of us who are criticizing Trump because, look, there's a reason. And I saw, by the way, Michael Reagan, who at some point was kind of a never-Trumper.
This is Ronald Reagan's son.
Ronald Reagan's adopted son. I hate to throw that out there. But you know, I guess Reagan had Ron and Patty and Maureen. Michael Reagan, was Michael adopted with Jane Wyman? I forget. Anyway, Michael Reagan, Reagan's son, who is a talk radio host, and initially was very critical of Trump basically saying that Trump wasn't Reagan, Trump wasn't, fit to be mentioned in the same sentence as Reagan, was out there basically saying, like, the same assholes, I'm quoting him, who are criticizing Trump for meeting with Kim are the same people who told my dad he shouldn't, meet with Gorbachev. And, like, there's a lot of problems with that, including the fact that, like, Gorbachev was, like, the fourth Soviet president that Reagan dealt with. This was in his second term. Reagan walked out of a meeting, with Gorbachev when he wouldn't agree to SDI. So anyway, it's interesting. So people are basically lining up to either be with Trump and to excuse him for things they would have attacked Obama for, or I think some of us are being consistent and saying this is a bad idea.
But you don't know anyone in conservative circles who is saying, I was with Trump, but I can't abide by this. This crosses my line.
No, I don't. I think that low-hanging fruit has already been picked. If there were people who were going to be, who were going to change, or that this was like now has been too much. Like there have been so many things that have happened that they would have already. I think the attrition would have already happened if it were going to happen. Maybe I'm missing something, but I find that, Bill, I'll be honest with you, man, I find it's very hard to keep up to date with the news these days. Like, it is going so fast, and there is so much. I think by design, Trump floods the zone with news. So maybe I missed something, but as far as I know, this is breaking down, the usual suspects, so to speak. What
happens on the right? I grant this is, is hypothetical, but I don't think a crazy hypothetical. What if Bolton resigns or gets fired? I think resigning seems more plausible. He has to be wondering what has happened to my life. How did I get in this place? And he tweeted after the New York Times reported there was talk of letting North Korea keep nuclear weapons. He tweeted out that there's been no discussion in the National Security Council about that, and whoever is doing this is trying to box Trump in, which just seemed to expose that he seems to be out of the loop. He was sent to Mongolia during the North Korea trip. He has to be wondering where he stands in the administration, and if he loses these major arguments, it's hard to see why. I understand him being transactional. I know Trump's not my kind of guy, but I can worm my way into the bureaucracy and get my way. Yeah. If he's not getting his way, you could foresee him leaving, and that being a fairly prominent breach between Trump and old line national interest foreign policy conservatives. Would that change the equation at all?
No. But first, let me just say this. My main problem with Trump isn't his foreign policy. It's that he doesn't have a foreign policy. Like, if I thought he had a coherent plan to show peace through strength or toughness, that I could be okay with that. Or let's do something different. Let's reach out to people that have never been talked to before. Like, I might disagree with that philosophically, but at least there would be a coherent plan. It seems to me that Trump's motives are mainly driven by his want to make history and to get attention and to have a photo op. Those are not good enough reasons to give away the store. The thing that North Korea wants more than anything else, the thing Kim wants more than anything else, is legitimacy. This is a carrot. A future president could have used a trip to North Korea as a reward for some real meaningful, compromise or agreement. Trump just gives it away promiscuously. So I don't get it. Now, you asked me about Bolton. Nobody cares about John Bolton. I mean, look. Bill Kristol may, but he's already off the reservation. Like, if James Mattis leaving didn't do the trick, and if H.R. McMaster leaving didn't,
Bolton seems different. Bolton seems to has some constituency of prominence of his own, a personification of a uncompromising, unrelenting national interest foreign policy conservatism, highly militaristic, and cutting a deal with North Korea that literally is all concession and no compromise is in direct violation of that. It seems like that would be a different kind of resignation than a Mattis or a McMaster.
I don't think so, because Trump is more popular than Jesus Christ in the Republican Party. And I mean that literally. Like, he really is. Like, screw the Beatles. Trump is bigger than Jesus in the Republican Party. That's pretty clear. You think Bolton, some Fox News? I mean, look, Bolton's fine, but Donald Trump is. If Donald Trump says that what he's doing is awesome, then it is. It's a cult, and so that's where we are. No, anybody who is going to leave because of Bolton, is probably not there anyway.
Now, does this? Well, I won't go down that road. Let's shift to Democrats.
Okay.
So we had the explosive exchange between Harris and Biden last week. We had a ton of attention around the CNN poll that came out yesterday that showed Biden dropping 10 points. Kamala catapulting into second place. Biden's still doing better with African Americans than whites, but still losing 14 points among African Americans, and Kamala gaining considerably. Now, that wasn't the only poll that's come out since the debates. There are two others where Biden does better. 33% in both the Politico Morning Consult poll and the Hill-Harris X poll. In the Politico poll, he was down 5. In the Hill poll, he was down 2. These are all fully post-debate polls. And Sanders remained in second place in those two other polls, but Harris comes up in all of them. And I think Warren came up in one other one, and she was flat in the Politico poll. So you average the polls out, it still shows Biden taking a hit and Kamala rising, and increasingly clarifying four-way race. Not that there can't be still further movement, but if it was those four, that would be a fairly complete set of candidates that covers a wide range of the Democratic Party. Does this mean that this is the beginning of the end for Biden? This is just the start of his fall, or is there still room for him to recover? Do the other two polls suggest that the hit wasn't completely fatal? And does this mean Harris is here to stay? Does it mean Bernie's on the outs? Does it mean Warren's rise is somewhat blunted by the rise of Harris? I mean, there's a lot of complicating dynamics and factors here.
Look, I mean, I know that there's a recency bias, but I'm inclined to think if you forced me to sort of make a call today, I'm inclined to think that Biden is done, and that what has happened is that that Kamala has exposed a vulnerability that Trump has. I'm sorry, that Biden has. The fact that I made that Kinsley gaffe is maybe part of the thing. And I think Kamala is looking really good as a potential nominee right now. So I think Biden's in trouble. Our good friend John Ziegler had a really good analogy. I thought it's sort of like if you're watching your football team and you're watching them in preseason and you're not sure how good they're going to be, and then in week one, you can kind of tell, man, our offensive line is not going to be able to protect the quarterback. It's just, and there's no way this quarterback is going to go 16 games without getting knocked out. Now, sometimes teams do figure it out and do make it work, but usually once you realize that fetch ain't going to happen, you're in trouble. And that's kind of how I feel about Biden. I think he was just exposed. And I think he's out of touch with the Democratic Party and specifically with the people that matter in the Democratic Party, the woke Twitter folks, the people who want you to boycott Nike because they have an American flag, on the back, the people who want to throw milkshakes at journalists.
Well, this is where
is out of touch.
That's where I strongly disagree with you. I mean, even in the broader point, I don't think it's correct that Biden has proven ideologically out of touch with the party, and I'll explain why in a second. And I think you're taking it way too far when you're saying you have to be in good with the concrete milkshake throwers to.
Well, okay, let me put it. Let me put it in more, less hyperbolic terms. Okay, the Democratic field, by and large, if you look at the things after those two debates that they have pretty much come out in favor of, whether it has to do with abortion or guns or immigration or health care, pretty radical left stuff. That and I also think that this is a party that loves them some identity politics, and Biden being just this old white dude who has the unfortunate baggage of having been around politics for a long time and had to make some tough decisions at times that were very different from the times in which we're living now. I just don't think that guy can survive in this progressive Democratic Party.
So here's where I disagree. I think Biden's mistakes are all unforced errors. He brought up segregationists, which leads right into the busing conversation, and he had to know the two things are intertwined. And he wasn't fully prepared for what was coming at him in the debate. Now, all accounts, he wasn't clueless. They knew attacks were coming, and in fact, there's some. When I first saw the exchange, now mind you, Kamala Harris, personal friends with Beau Biden, talked about their
relationship. Got a hell of a way of showing it.
Talked about their relationship in her book. Praised Joe Biden, before the race fully took shape. And so I thought, when I saw it, that Biden must have prepared for all sorts of attacks, but didn't see Kamala coming. Didn't think that she would bring the hurt the way others might, and therefore didn't think through that she would bring up her personal experience with busing. He wasn't prepared for that. Now
he needs to watch The Godfather.
Now, there was a Politico article that suggested that he was prepared for that he did do enough. I mean, I don't know if this is based on direct reporting or just analyzing what he said, that he knew that the Berkeley program wasn't federally forced. It was locally decided. He knew that she was bused as a child. So that and he was prepared to say, hey, I was a public defender, wink, wink, you were a prosecutor. So he was aware of some elements of these potential attacks, but clearly did not execute well. And I did an MSNBC hit before this about the Hyde Amendment stuff, where I said, when Biden is hit with these things and he responds with strength and defiance, he looks better than when he responds in a wobbly way, in a zigzag way, in an apologetic way.
Right. But here's
let me just finish this one point. So in the debate, he was trying to be strong. He was trying not to look meek in response to it, but the response was still wobbly. He didn't even articulate his own busing position well, which granted is a complicated position that he held. I'm not even saying it was the right one, but he could have articulated better than he did. Instead, he stumbled into what sounded like a states' rights argument, which really wasn't his argument. And now that's being hung around his neck. So I think it's the weakness that he showed which undercuts. Not that the race issue is not relevant here, but I think the electability argument of Biden's is tied to strength. And that was not shown in the debate. And when you look at the CNN poll, which was his worst poll, that poll said, number one, choosing between a candidate who can beat Trump or one that you agree with on the big issues, 2-1, Democrats say someone who can beat Trump is more important than who I agree with on the big issues. And when the CNN poll asked, do you support abolishing private insurance? 50% of Democrats said they don't want to abolish private insurance, and another 11% didn't even want to have a national health insurance program if that involves raising taxes. Now, we talked last week. I agree with you that there is a bigger leftward drift on those cultural issues, abortion, immigration, guns. But to say that the whole party is going full left across the board, there's a lot of data that still contradicts that, even with Biden showing weakness based on his performance.
There were tons of polling, tons of exit polling that showed that Republicans didn't care that much about immigration. They wanted an amnesty. They want a pathway to citizenship, and they didn't support a wall. And yet, Donald Trump won by pushing that issue. Preference.
Well, clearly those poll numbers didn't capture the sentiment of the party. And granted, Trump won with a plurality of votes, not a majority in the primary and in the general. Not even a plurality in the general. But there was pushback on Medicare for all, pushback on single payer in the debates, and got a decent audience response that's reflective of the polling.
All right. Let me say first, I agree with you about Biden making unforced errors, and the fact that the double whammy is that Kamala didn't just score points, but in so doing, she looks like the person best able to take on Trump.
She looks strong.
She looks tougher, and that is actually the big thing. I would argue that these things, however, are related. Joe Biden is out of touch, out of step with what's popular. And I saw this happen to Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio used to be a very confident and eloquent speaker. He would be on the debate stage and he would say things that in some audiences would have gotten a standing ovation, and it would fall flat in the debate stage, because I think the kinds of people who go to debates are either partisans for one candidate or another, or hardcore ideological right-wingers, right, in a Republican debate. I think a similar thing happened to Joe Biden. He may have a silent majority of Democrats out there in middle America who are with him. But in a debate, the kinds of people who come to a debate, I think that the energy, the excitement, the support was much more progressive than Biden. I think that plays psychologically. You feel outnumbered. You feel like what you have to say is not popular with the crowd. It's a form of psychological warfare. And then I think what compounds it is when you have an African-American woman attacking you on stage and talking about how she was a little girl. And by the way, she's now in favor of busing. Did you see this? Kamala Harris has now publicly come out in favor of forced busing of your kids and mine.
Let's circle back to that point after you finish.
Put a pin in that. Back to my original point. I think that Joe Biden would have a hard time displaying toughness and strongness and attacking an African-American female candidate who is talking about her experience as a little girl. That's a very dangerous thing for Joe Biden to do. So on one hand, it's really a no-win situation. You want him to look tough. You want him to look strong. But I think he's probably afraid of being too tough and too strong in that situation.
I don't think he's afraid. I don't think he thought the attack was coming in that exact personal, intense, and dramatic way. That's my guess. I mean, because obviously there was reporting ahead of time that he knew attacks were coming. I mean, anyone could see that. But let's go back to this busing question, because I do think this is, if there is going to be a significant backlash to what Harris did and the overall direction of the party, this is one area where that might come into play. Another is, I mean, probably less so on health insurance for undocumented immigrants, because pretty much every Democrat didn't want to run to the center on that question. They didn't want to do anything to suggest they weren't going to be in lockstep with immigrants and immigrant advocates. But on busing, Biden is sticking to his position from the 70s, which was, and this is getting obscure because you're seeing in some of the fact checks, Biden makes a lot of very blunt statements across the board. So he said things sort of like busing's an asinine concept. Why should a black child sit next to my white kid?
Even Bernie the other day.
Yes. Well, I want to get to that. So you can take some of the comments that Biden made in the 70s, and like in a vacuum, they really rankle. But he also said to a white crowd in the 70s, if there was government-created segregation, I would pay for the helicopters to send your kids across town, and the white families were enraged at Biden for saying that. So he said very hyperbolic things on both sides because he was walking this really fine line, which he repeated post debate that he is still for forced busing in cases of de jure segregation that's government created, but not for de facto based on other migratory patterns and existing community composition and such. Which again, I'm not saying that's the correct position. I'm saying that is his position. And when Harris's campaigner, she says, "I'm for busing," we don't know what that means in detail yet. And there was a Twitter exchange between Biden's press secretary and Harris's press secretary, where the Harris press secretary was bringing up these past Biden statements, and the Biden's press secretary saying, "Are you saying that Harris is for busing in for de facto segregation and not just de jure? Because if you're not saying that, then her position's the same as Biden's." And forgive me if I missed the part of the whole exchange. I don't believe the Harris press secretary responded to that question. So I don't think we know in detail exactly what Harris means by busing, or anybody else who's jumping on the question. And we do know, as you said, that Bernie, being present as an adult in the 70s the way Biden was like, I'm not so sure I want to go all the way down that road. So I think there is going to be a broader conversation about desegregation, not just in schools, but across the board. And if I was Biden, if I was advising Biden, I would widen this lens. I would talk, because Biden, the implication of Biden is that he was like other segregationists, and that he was sort of disingenuous in saying that he wasn't really racist and was looking to maintain segregation. And Biden can say, I think accurately, that he wasn't disingenuous about his belief in civil rights. He thought this one thing was a bad tactic, and is on record supporting other things that would desegregate. And he could widen the lens now. He can go to Obama and say the Obama administration had a housing desegregation plan that was very innovative, based on interactive computer mapping. And if you can, over the long haul, integrate our communities, then you don't need the tool of busing, which inevitably causes a lot of friction and complication. And I would not be, so I don't know if Biden's going to do that, but I know Bernie has.
You know what I think Biden should do? And just carry a Obama cardboard cutout with him everywhere he goes.
Well, I mean, he uses.
I stole that from Jamie Kilstein.
I mean, he clearly likes using Obama as a shield. And when you're just saying, I was Obama's vice president, I think Obama's super great. Like that's pretty close to my best friend's black. Like that's not going to sustain Biden over time.
It's all he's got, Bill.
It's not all he has. He could talk about his plan for desegregation writ large. And I wouldn't be surprised if everyone else starts getting into that discussion, because busing on its own is a complicated issue, and it opens up the space for a more holistic discussion of the issue.
Well, I'm going to be a broken record on two main points. Number one, maybe I shouldn't be surprised, but we've got Donald Trump, who is a horrible president, who has really abandoned the center in many ways. The sane, moderate, centrist, sane, civil, you name anything that starts with a C. He has abandoned that turf. And yet the Democrats, on issue after issue, now they're in favor of, at least one of them, arguably the front runner, is in favor of busing. Now, you would say, well, we don't quite know what that means. Well, guess who will use that? Donald Trump will use that in an ad.
I agree with that.
And Michigan and Wisconsin and Florida. And you go down the list. Abortion, immigration, healthcare. They're on the record of being very radical on so many issues. And I think it's pretty amazing that they don't even care about. Apparently, they're not aware that to win the presidency, you might want to win some people who are not already woke Twitter, like that you might need to get somebody who lives in Pennsylvania or Ohio or Michigan. Anyway, enough of that. My other point is I really have pretty much I'm not 100% on this, but I'm getting there. Just as only the Republican Party would have elected Donald Trump, a 70-year-old thrice married casino magnate, when they could have had, let's say, a Marco Rubio, for example, as their nominee. Only the Republican Party. Let's go with the old guy who gave money to Hillary Clinton and is a birther. Let's go, just as only the Republican Party would make that move, which paid off for them. Even they didn't win the popular vote, but it worked this time. I just don't think in this environment the Democratic Party is going to nominate an old guy, an old white guy who has been on the record for being in a different world, in a different context, voting for things that now someone who's been elected for 15 minutes can swoop in and demagogue the hell out of and call him a racist, call him a misogynist. And he's on stage trying to let me explain to you the nuance of this. Right. It doesn't work in this. We live in a dumbed down soundbite culture, Bill. I don't think Biden can pull this off. I think he is bleeding out. I think he's in real trouble. Maybe he can turn it around.
Well, I think Biden has to perform much better. I mean, he can't lollygag his way through the race. He can't.
I think he's lucky there's not a debate next week.
What's that?
I think he's lucky there's not a debate tomorrow.
Well, yeah, he could use some time on the trail himself.
Yeah.
Being good on the trail himself, like giving good speeches, not being as halting, picking some interesting, giving a big speech on desegregation, or maybe shifting off of the race issue and bringing it to Trump on foreign policy. I think there's a lot of things he could do to show people, I still got it. I'm still.
Yeah, he's got 2 or 3 weeks before the next debate.
Yeah,
when is it?
I think it's towards the end of July.
He should be very thankful for that, in my opinion.
Well, I mean, if the debate was the week after and he gave a great debate before, that could also get put behind him. He needs to perform better. Period. And we don't know how. Just to take this one issue, let's say Trump lays into Harris on busing now. It doesn't wait till the general election. And I mean, as strong as performance as Harris had in this last debate, she's still a little iffy on health insurance. She still gets tangled up on this question of abolishing private insurance. I think she's trying to straddle the populist progressive lane and the moderate pragmatist lane in a way that Bernie and Warren aren't, and that makes it a little complicated. I'm being very speculative here. My guess is she doesn't come out as crisply on this question of single payer because she's preparing to pivot in the general. She doesn't want to be totally boxed down and saying it is single payer or bust in the general. So she's giving herself a degree of wiggle room. That's my personal interpretation. As she tries to straddle, I think straddling it makes a lot of sense. You're trying to unify the party. You don't want to just be in one lane. If you want to take a chunk out of Biden, you need to take a chunk out of people who want electability. You got to prove your electability. If Warren and Bernie seem unelectable because of their issue positions, Kamala shouldn't necessarily be in the same boat. Or she might say, I got to keep the daylight there limited, so I'm not exposed, and I'll pivot later. I don't know exactly what her tack's going to be. But to that end, she's taking some bold positions, like busing. If she gets hammered on that now, let's say she gets hammered on that, and her trial heats with Trump look weak, and Biden's look relatively better, or at least, I mean, maybe Biden takes a hit now, but if he can pivot off of that and regain traction, eventually put some distance between her and himself again vis-a-vis Trump, the electability factor is still really strong in the Democratic Party. So that's why I would not look. If Biden doesn't perform better, he's not going to look electable. So I'm not saying he's got it in the back, but there's still plenty of opportunity for him to show his electability and for Harris to not be seen as electable, depending on how these issues play out over the next several weeks.
Yeah, I mean, if he does better, he does better, right? I mean, we can agree on that. But what happened is that I think, I mean, for one thing, one of the obvious repercussions of this is that there is now blood in the water.
Yes.
There is going to be an incentive to play the identity politics game against Biden on whatever your issue. We saw, what's his name, Swalwell or whatever. The only identity politics he could play is the young card. Yeah. And he played it. It was pathetic, but he tried.
I don't think that's what, got the blood in the water on Thursday.
It didn't, but that's the only card. That's the only identity politics card he has, is that he's young.
And I mean, Buttigieg doesn't really trade on being Gale that much. The identity card he generally plays is his youth card. That it's time for a new generation. That's what he pushes the hardest, and I don't think that's serving him all that well. Although he has his own complications with what's going on in South Bend and his police force. I'm sorry, I've distracted you from your point. Go on.
Oh, I think I've made my point 2 times.
But just quickly on Buttigieg, I mean, there's some people who are like, wow, what a big fundraising haul he's had. This is amazing. And he comes in at 4% in the CNN poll. Now he does better in Iowa polling
0%
with African Americans.
I probably am at 3 or 4%.
And I should say that the CNN analyst I started to be saying, like, that literally means he had 0 respondents saying 0 African American respondents. It wasn't like it was rounded down. It was literally 0. I mean, I do not see how Buttigieg ever gets significant African-American support. And it's not to say, like, I think he's doing a horrible job as mayor. He's in a tough situation. Jesse Jackson said, look, he's being transparent. He's doing his best. It's a hard situation he's been put into. It's understandable. But consider, you have Kamala Harris. You have Cory Booker. You have Joe Biden still leading amongst African-Americans in every poll.
You know what I would love to see? The same poll, the same screening, which means you're targeting likely Democratic primary voters, right? But include Trump's name. I bet you Trump is doing better with African Americans than Buttigieg. No, he couldn't do worse.
You can't do worse than 0. Although in a general election, I don't know if that would be true. But the point I want to make here is that donations are not, by any stretch, perfect indicators of breadth of support. They are indications of intensity of niche support. And so Buttigieg has a relatively small niche of college-educated whites who have more disposable income and are making his campaign very flush. And so he's not going to go anywhere. He'll be in the debates. He'll make it to Iowa because he can pay his staff. But there's almost no chance he's actually the nominee because he's so limited in so many other ways. And the DNC has made donations a primary criteria for getting into the debates, and I think we increasingly see how ridiculous this is. Andrew Yang is going to be in the September debates.
Bill, I'm going to have to stop you there. I'm ready to make an announcement. I'm ready to make an announcement, which is this. Do you remember Don Imus?
Yeah.
Just in the morning?
Yeah.
So he endorsed John McCain in 2000.
Right.
He endorsed John McCain was his Republican candidate.
Right.
And Bill Bradley was his Democratic candidate.
Right.
And mainly it was just because they came on his show.
Mm-hmm.
I'm ready my Democratic candidate for now is Andrew Yang. And I will not have you badmouth him on the DMZ.
But I made this point before saying it's ridiculous that Williamson and Yang were in the debates based on their donor success.
Is Republican.
And so. if you don't agree with it on that front, I mean, I'm not saying Buttigieg shouldn't be in the debates, but I think it shows that just because you have X number of donors like we treat the small donors as if it is indicative of the grassroots, the Democratic Party. There are many more non-donors than donors, small or large. There was a New York Times poll. I think it was published in the Times or done by the Times. I forget who conducted it. But it basically said this is the first choices of the donors, the small and large donors, and it was like Warren first. And that's not reflective of any other polling that we see. It's a different community. And why should that community get a leg up on the rest of the Democratic electorate? It would be much better if the DNC just took the responsibility of saying, these are the qualified candidates who have a plausible reason of running for president, and they get to be in the debates, and then we'll do polling after that point to cull. The donor criteria is ridiculous.
Yeah. By the way, speaking of polling, I'm a little hurt and offended also, Bill, that you have not mentioned that my gal Tulsi won the Drudge poll of debate performance.
I mean, that's as good a criteria as the small donor criteria for inclusion in debates. Who wins the Drudge poll? They get to be in.
Well, Trump won a lot of them, so maybe I don't know. Maybe that means she's going to win the Republican nomination someday.
Now, you made a comment earlier that Trump and the Democrats have abandoned the sane center.
I think that is pretty safe to say.
And you have been heavily ratioed on Twitter for making a similar comment, and you made a second comment that progressives praise AOC for calling attention to horrible conditions in these immigrant detention centers, but conservatives might criticize AOC for being condescending to the border patrol. You know, which narrative is right? Both? And you got very heavily criticized for that.
Yeah, let me put that one in context, just so you know. So this story was kind of breaking, and I saw a lot of that AOC had done a tour and was criticizing a border patrol and saying that she heard that someone was that the border patrol told them if they were thirsty to drink out of the toilet. Okay, so that's one narrative. Maybe it's true, being pushed by AOC and the mainstream blue check.
Other Congress people who were there said they heard the same stories from detainees.
Then there's another sort of narrative where, I don't know if you've seen in some of these prisons, but trust me, I would not want to drink out of this either. But there are toilets, and then on top of the toilet is a water fountain. Have you seen these?
I've not.
Okay, so I've seen these, and people were putting up pictures and asking is this what they when she says drink out of the toilet, are they referring to this sort of facility? I really wouldn't want to drink out of that water fountain either, but it's dramatically different than drinking out of, say, the toilet bowl, right? Mm-hmm. But who knows? And then I saw reports, some reporter at the Washington Examiner was reporting that that AOC had berated some of these border agents, and that she had really been uncool to them and, kind of smug and condescending to them. And the point I'm making is, at this point, at the moment, who knows, but at the moment when I tweeted that, there were really these two competing narratives. One narrative is AOC is this heroic champion who goes in and sees these deplorable conditions that migrants are being forced to live under, and she's calling out. And that's one world. We'll call that the MSNBC world, right? Their reality. And there's this other America, we'll call it the Fox News America, where these brave border control agents who are working class folks are being berated by this smug, condescending congresswoman. And maybe they're just drinking out of a water fountain. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, my point was these two competing narratives, we don't know which one is true. And in fact, it's possible that they're actually even both true. Maybe she is a hero standing up for them, and maybe she did scold these border agents, and people are going to latch on to whichever part of that story best confirms their assumptions and their worldview. That's the point I made. I'm not sure why it aroused such anger from. The only answer I have is that there are these people on Twitter who are very angry and unhinged.
Well, I don't think that is the only conclusion one can draw. I think where you're getting in trouble here is, it's one thing to observe that there are two competing narratives about this situation. It's another as a very well-informed professional political commentator to kind of shrug, like, I don't know which one is right, when as far as which has the most moral urgency and import, any objective observer would say if we are treating DNATs in subhuman conditions, that is clearly the more important thing to talk about here than the hurt feelings of someone on the Border Patrol.
No, but it's not just that, Bill. It's like, is this even true? We don't know.
That's a wholly separate. I don't think your tweet got into that question.
No, because I have 140 characters, but putting it in context, Bill. You're talking to someone. Let me just get to kind of the thrust of what I think is the larger argument, the larger point that I'm trying to make. Because as you noted, there were two tweets that aroused anger. One of which was me saying that which I've said for years, that I can't vote for Trump in good conscience, even though I'm a conservative, even though I like the tax cuts, even though I like the judges, I can't vote for him. And also I can't vote for the Democrats because, as I've laid out here very clearly, they've radicalized, they've embraced all sorts of left-wing radical positions that I just can't support. And so I'm not going to vote. And I've been saying that for years. But the thing about being ratioed, and I don't know how many. It feels like a lot when you start getting, and these are people that I've never heard of, but they've probably got 60 or 70,000 Twitter followers. They're sports writers. They're people who are commentators for websites I've never even heard of, but apparently are legit. And you're being inundated with people cursing at me, calling me names, saying that I'm inhumane, saying I'm a horrible person, saying I'm privileged, saying that if I don't vote at all, it's the same as me voting for Trump. So the point that I'm making is, Bill, you're talking to a guy who has been criticizing Donald Trump from day one. I'd venture to say 70% of the things I've written in the last 2 or 3 years have criticized Donald Trump on all sorts of things, including his inhumane treatment at the border, and family separation, which I went on TV and criticized, which I went on the show and criticized, which I went to my column and criticized, which I went on Twitter and criticized. None of that matters because the radical unhinged left treats me, I might as well be a deplorable. I might as well be wearing a Make America Great Again hat as we're taping this. And I'm telling you, Bill, they're not going to push me into the arms of Donald Trump because I'm not reactionary in that sense. But I'm telling you, so many people in my position, which is somebody who was very critical of Trump, skeptical of Trump, who has been attacked by the Twitter mob, this woke Twitter mob, so many people in my position would now go running back to their tribe and running to vote for Donald Trump. I'm not going to do it. But guess what? I think this is part of the larger trend of negative polarization and negative partisanship and the polarization, and why you don't have very many people left like me, because they're being forced to either completely go all in, abortion for everybody, no Nike, no American flags on Nike shoes, or vote for Trump, make America great again.
Well, I don't think anyone would expect you to abandon all of your positions. But
no, I just have to vote for the Democratic nominee.
Well, yeah,
who disagrees with me on all of my positions.
Well, I think what would behoove you, I think what feeds the sentiment that if you're going to criticize Trump but not vote against Trump and do something to get him out of office, and your criticisms don't amount to very much, I think what feeds that sentiment is.
Let's stop there. Do you think my criticisms don't amount to very much?
Well, I mean,
look, I'm not
in the biggest scheme of things.
I'm not a professional voter. I'm not a professional activist. I'm an opinion journalist. This is what I do. And as Tom Stoppard has said, I believe that words matter. They may not change the world, but sometimes, every once in a while, they nudge the world a little bit. So I believe in the power of words, and I think I would actually argue I probably have more influence with what I do criticizing Donald Trump as a center-right journalist than I do casting a silly vote that's not going to be the difference.
But you could carry that argument and say all of the Never Trump conservative commentator community, which if they spend 2.5 years criticizing Trump only to then say, oh, those Democrats, they are just beyond the pale. I can't go with them.
Bill, they're beyond the pale. They could earn my vote. Buttigieg, prime example. Let's go back to the debate. He is keyed up to talk about faith. Does he ever once talk about his own? He never once talked about his own faith or how that worldview led him to be compassionate and to care about the stranger and to care about the vulnerable. All he did was criticize Republicans and call them hypocrites. They have to earn my vote, Bill. I don't have to vote for a Democrat just because I don't like Trump. They don't want my vote. None of them are competing for the votes for people like me.
They're certainly not going to strain themselves.
Why should
they
say
things? Well, they might. They might not have to. They might not need Matt Lewis's vote to win. Number one. They're not going to abandon, their core principles and their core convictions to appease Never Trump conservatives, who seem very, very elusive as far as winning their vote. But I think the problem here is that you're not just you. I mean, the Never Trump conservative community. Yeah.
And I'm fine. But let me just say, Bill, you and I have been doing this for 10 years. Yes. We can have these, I think, intimate, honest discussions.
I'm happy to have them.
Capital.
I'm happy to have them. Okay. Let's take a concrete subject. Health care, as part of the Affordable Care Act for undocumented immigrants. Okay, so you're very quick to call that a radical left position. And I understand not agreeing with the position, and I can look at the poll data and say it's not the majority view of the country. It may not be a politically wise stance to take. But if a Democratic president got elected and implemented that policy and, oh no, a few cents of my tax dollars covered the health insurance of an undocumented immigrant, which in some indirect way already happens when they go to an emergency room, am I going to treat that with the same fervor and antagonism as I do with everything Donald Trump is doing to actual immigrant children? But it sounds.
My criticism of that specific issue has been, I don't think it plays well in Peoria. I think that is a bad political move.
But you called it radical left.
If someone came to me, if Joe Biden's running for president and he says, you know what, if he just says, let's say he says all the right things, abortion's a complicated issue. I think it should be safe, legal, and rare, but that's not what this election's about anyway. I'm not going to nominate any radical judges that are going to change that issue. But for me, this is about civility. It's about restoring honor and integrity to the White House. I just want to get us back on track. I'm a believer. I'm a man of faith. And I want to do what's right to take care of immigrants at the border. We're going to settle things down. I will say the one thing, though, is if you're here illegally, we need to secure the border. But if you're here already, we'll have a pathway to citizenship. And if we expand health care, then you're going to be included. I could be okay with that, Bill. I could be okay with that.
But in that circumstance,
none of them are saying that.
Well, I think as a political matter, it's a lot smarter to say, I'm going to get the undocumented here on a pathway to citizenship so they will be legalized, and then they will get that health care.
Right. You know what the Democrats...
You get to... It's the same exact endpoint, because all immigrants want that. Everyone wants the undocumented to become citizens.
Right. And I'm okay with that. But they don't want to secure the border. They want...
Well, now you're making bigger jumps. Now you're making bigger jumps.
Well, yeah, but my point is, when I say that the Democratic Party has radicalized and gone leftward and alienated anybody in the center, I don't think it's just one issue. I could probably live with one issue. I could tell, like, I'm way more like pro-immigration than most. I mean, I could live with, it's everything, Bill. Now it's school busing. It's what's tomorrow.
I think
what's the next?
Let's not. We should wrap because we're pushing up on an hour, and I don't want to go issue based on everything. But what I would recommend, my suggestion to you, both in talking about it and in considering your own vote, tone, emphasis. All those things are obviously going to be different in a primary phase, as they are in the Republican Party in most elections. Trump aside, Republicans generally sound different in the primary than they do in the general. That's standard practice. Yeah. Whoever's president is going to face a divided Congress. I mean, it may be democratically controlled, but it's not going to be 60 Senate votes Democrat. It's going to be roughly 51-49.
Bill, I'm a commentator, man. I need material. What if do you think every column I should write would be, well, the Democrats are saying something crazy, but they have to win the primary. They'll probably they'll return to the center to win the general. Like, that's a great column.
How do you feel
that into the Daily Beast?
I'll end on this note because I do want to ask you. I think it was Matt Iglesias on Twitter said that there is a professional obligation, I'm not quoting verbatim here, but or it's a professional incentive for the Never Trump conservatives to never come over to the Democrats, because once they did, then they're not interesting pundits anymore. Then they're just typical establishment liberal pundits. And what good are they? Their value is in criticizing both sides. So you'll never get them to actually say the Democrats are doing something sensible.
Look, that's just patently false. A lot of people, like Jamie Weinstein, publicly said he would and voted for Hillary Clinton. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't think he became a Democrat. He's probably not even a Republican. Mm-hmm. But I think Max Boot probably voted for
Boots come over.
Okay, so there's one example.
Right.
But people like me, the reason that I can't do it because I disagree with them fundamentally, philosophically on almost every single issue. It would be absurd for me to vote to become a Democrat.
But we never agree with everybody and everything. But you could ask yourself, what is going to be the impact on the country if this person is president or if this person is president? I don't agree with both candidates on a whole host of issues, but what is the likely outcome policy-wise, and what is more or less acceptable to me? And knowing that a Democratic president is going to be constrained to do a lot of things they might be saying loosely in the primary phase, I think you can factor that in and say, you know what, I don't agree with X, Y, and Z, but as far as damage to the country, I can make a quantitative assessment who's going to be better or worse.
I don't know. Number one, I don't feel obliged to adhere to this binary lesser of two evils paradigm. So that's the big thing. I don't feel like I have to do that. I feel like people have to earn my vote. And I've said before, I would vote for Justin Amash. But secondly, and I swear to you, this is true, I actually don't, the way things are headed, I really don't know which side is more dangerous right now. I don't. But I would say this, Donald Trump is disqualified. I've said I'm not voting for him, and I didn't vote for him. But I don't see, never say never, but I mean, I don't see a scenario where this Democratic Party nominates somebody that I can in good conscience cast a vote for.
I will give you the last word. Matt Lewis, always good to talk to you. Happy America's birthday on July 2nd.
We hardly even got into the pomp and circumstance of the 4th of July. I mean, will Ivanka be on top of a tank with a bullhorn? I don't know.
I mean, she'll have to pull herself away from Theresa May, to to be a part of the 4th celebration. You know, she's very busy on the global stage.
Yes, that was embarrassing when she tried to talk to world leaders. That didn't go well.
But enjoy your holiday, Matt.
All right, you too, man.
And we'll talk next week.
See ya.